I'm a pioneer. I'm an explorer. I'm a human, and I'm coming. I'm animated. I'm alive. My heart's big. It's got hot blood going through it fast. I like to fight, too. I like to eat. I like to have children. I'm here. I got a life force. This is a human.
TC and Jake.
Welcome in, folks. I'm TC Fleming here with Jake Kemp, and on with us this week we have a special guest, a return guest. You know him from the Bruenigs. He can be found on Twitter at SportsFanaticMB. It's Matt Bruenig. How's it going?
Oh, it's going great. Third time, long time. So, I'm having a good one.
What is in your mind right now your top ranked sports rule that you would like to change? Like as of today, I know it'll change next week, but
okay. So here's the idea. Okay, so let's say you fumble into the end zone, right? Instead of them getting a touchback, they get 7 points. The other team gets 7 points.
Wow.
Just keep,
going
really,
the other way.
I don't want people reaching for that pylon. That's too risky.
Yeah.
You hate excitement.
Often critiqued rule. A few people go that way. A bold stance. Do you follow? You know the band Eve 6? Did you see Eve 6 talking about you today?
No, I didn't.
Do you remember Eve 6?
I don't know Eve 6. What is Eve 6?
They had one big hit. It was whenever we were in middle school. I think they were a couple years older than you. So I remember this as early middle school. So it might have been elementary school for you. I don't want to sing it or anything.
Okay, I will. So there were two of them, and I'll tell you why they were both big for me, because they were both the top-ranked either prom or graduation songs. It was one of them had the term "heart in a blender." Do you remember that? It's like, heart in a blender, I've just been round to a beautiful oblivion. You don't remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's that one.
I know what you're talking about.
The other one, slightly less popular, was called "Here's to the Night." And I don't even know if I could sing that one, but that one was sort of the prom
songs
graduation.
to get hand jobs to, for sure.
Over the pant. But yeah, like in the last month, I feel like someone gave one of the guys from Eve 6 a Twitter account.
I think it's the lead singer. And,
okay.
And he tweets a lot. He tweets good, correct opinions. And the one today was the only Vox content worth listening to is Matt Bruenig going full autist and eviscerating the notion of lib pragmatism on the Ezra Klein show.
That's true. That was a great episode.
It did happen. I would say it's probably the best Vox content. Eve 6 is correct.
I would aspire to a level where, not that where Eve 6 is talking about me, but to where I don't know and someone else has to tell me, and it's not like the greatest thing that's happened to me in months.
Yeah, no,
I guess that says something.
I think I may have seen them tweet like a long time ago, and I didn't really have any idea. Eve 6, okay, whatever. But I didn't see that one today, and they didn't tag me in, I don't think.
No.
See it, so.
No, I didn't put the handle.
They were embarrassed because they knew you would not know who they were, but that's
that's great. Yeah, no, I like when John Cusack tweeted something about me once, but he's pretty active on Twitter, so that's not like a huge feather in the cap. But that's probably the peak I think that I've done. Susan Sarandon, I think, also, but again, same thing. She's that's how she is. So
my mother-in-law, who's a big MSNBC viewer, was telling us, like, I think that we were talking about Twitter, and she was like, "Oh yeah, I have famous people talk to me on there sometimes," and it was she retweeted Chaz Bono like approvingly, like, "This is great, this is right," and like Chaz was like, "Thank you."
It's a touch.
Same spectrum.
Just kind of dealing in the celebrity world. But anyways, we can continue talking about Twitter, or we could talk about this GameStop business. I just think, I don't know. We're all trying to process what's going on here, and figured you'd have interesting opinions about it. I guess just like as an establishing matter. Anytime I'm thinking about the stock market, I have your normal, tendency to get mad thinking about all those rich people. And it is your voice in my head moderating those opinions because you got your whole spiel about how financialization is actually the cleanest path to the means of production being controlled by the proletariat. I was wondering if you could kind of lay that one out for the audience.
Yeah, so we have a whole bunch of companies in this country, and they organize most of the production. Some of them are very big, some of them are very small, but that's kind of, how work is organized one way or another. And so, if you're a socialist and you're interested in saying, well, I'd like to kind of bring those into collective ownership in one form or another, how am I gonna do that? And if it's kind of like smaller or mid-sized businesses that are owned by their founder who still manages it, it's kind of a tricky thing. Like, you can't just like go in and swoop it from them. It's not even clear you'd be able to like manage it successfully because the person who runs it, they're pretty intimate with it. They know how it works. You may not be able to know how it works. So there's a lot of like transitionary problems in trying to, take over companies. But if companies sell their stock on stock exchanges, it's actually very easy to take over companies because all you have to do is buy the majority of their shares, and now you're a majority controlling owner of them. And so this was a point that was pointed out by a guy named Rudolf Hilferding in 1910. He wrote a book called Finance Capital, was pretty influential in Austria, which is, not a terribly influential country, though at the time, obviously, it became influential for bad reasons. But he pointed that out, and there's, been a little sort of community of people have been pointing that out for ever since. And in Sweden, when they were going to go full socialist in 1976, that was the approach that they tried to take. And were reasonably successful. They were defeated politically, but as a strategy, it seemed to be working. So, you have mixed feelings about it. It's a good way of allowing a lot of people to own companies simultaneously. Like, you can have millions of people own Facebook at the same time. But as it is right now, almost all the stock is owned by the top 10% of people. So it's not. It's not something to celebrate in its current form. It's just a useful bit of technology, social technology that could be used towards better ends.
And in the cases where those countries, they have leaned towards their larger companies being controlled by the masses, something I've always been interested in, we might have talked to you about this last time, but as a refresher, do they generally perform as well as you would expect them to if they were controlled by a very small number of people, or are you counterbalancing the sort of the lack, maybe the trailing off somewhat of the creation of wealth with the public good that they aim to do? Or how would you expect those companies to perform in this country if that was a path we followed?
Yeah, so when you look at, for example, Norway and Finland, who have kind of the highest levels of state ownership in the developed world, they categorize the companies that they state own in a couple of different buckets. The first bucket are companies that have some kind of social purpose that is intermixed with their commercial purpose. So in the U.S., the obvious example would be the U.S. Postal Service, where on the one hand, it's a company that ships stuff, and a lot of the stuff it ships, it's profitable to ship it, and it's just doing normal enterprise. But on the other hand, it also has a social purpose to get out to the most rural areas of the country and provide them affordable shipping, even though that's not profitable to do. And so there's a kind of mixed bag there. It's got a commercial purpose and a social purpose. And so for those companies, of course, you're not going to find them necessarily as profitable as comparable companies that aren't run by the state. But if you then go to a second category, which are companies that have sort of purely commercial purposes, you could think about a company like Walmart or Exxon or something like that, whatever the equivalent would be. Those companies do just as well. as their comparators in other countries that are owned privately. So it's really just how you want to manage it. And like you said, you can't. Some of the firms you're probably going to say, yeah, we want to dovetail this with certain social concerns that are going to reduce the profitability of the firm, and that's okay because we're essentially implementing social policy through the company, and that's fine. And then others you probably say, well, we just want to run it like a normal business, get the profits, but use the profits for social spending, not to kind of pad out the incomes of the wealthiest people in the country.
So about the GameStop Robinhood stuff, I don't know. I don't know how much you've dove into this or spent a lot of time kind of developing takes on it. And it's always tough to predict the future, but I think that the biggest question for me going forward, yesterday on the podcast, we kind of tried to do all the looking backwards of explaining, as best we understand how this sort of thing happens and so forth. But just to look forward, do you think this will have any impact on anything? I'm sure that there's takes being written right now about how, this is a new era and things will never be the same. Kind of seems to me like it's equally possible that it's a weird thing that we all kind of laugh about a couple of years from now that we haven't thought about in quite some time because it was a one-off event that had no significance. Do you have any sense about which one of those seems more likely to you?
Yeah, I think the latter for sure. I think it's it's a fun little story, but I don't see what the lasting social significance of it is. If there is any, it's very specific to Robinhood and this new app that lets you trade options really easily and really cheaply, which was new. And I don't know what they do about that. Do they end up shutting that kind of thing down because it's too it creates too much volatility? I don't know, but at the end of the day, someone's going to lose a ton of money. Like the people who have rushed into the GameStop stock, some of these people are going to be holding the bag and they're going to lose a ton of money. And so I like the idea that you would keep doing that over and over again once you've seen people lose the amount of money that some people are getting ready to lose. It seems hard to believe. The other thing is that this does actually happen not regularly, but it happens periodically, sort of between hedge funds and between institutional investors who play these games with one another from time to time. So there's a great movie actually called Betting on Zero, which is about Bill Ackman, who runs Pershing Square. I think that's the name of the hedge fund. He went. He had his firm go short on Herbalife because Herbalife is basically a multi-layer marketing kind of pyramid scheme business, and he went short on it, and they were going to try to get the U.S. regulators to look at it and shut it down because it's a pyramid scheme. And for whatever reason, he had some beef with Carl Icahn, who's one of the big activist investors on Wall Street. And Carl Icahn decided to basically do the same thing that these Redditors had done with GameStop, which is to say he put a ton of his money into Herbalife stock just to screw up that short position that Bill Ackman got into on Herbalife. So, we see this kind of thing from time to time as it is. The only novelty is retail investors are doing it through Reddit, but I don't know how long that's going to last.
Would have been easier for the guy that wanted to combat the short to just hire Drew Brees, because that seems to keep a multi-level marketing vitamin scheme alive.
Is he pitching Herbalife?
Advocare. Yeah,
Advocare,
he's been the Advocare guy for a couple decades now, which is somehow never brought up.
They definitely do. They do that kind of stuff for sure to help with to help blow up the short. Get different pitchmen and work with the FTC. Oh, this is a great company. It was a funny. It's an interesting battle, but it takes on the same kind of dimensions of what the hell is this? What is the point of this? I thought these markets. You guys tell us these markets are here to help allocate capital, get money to productive uses, and it's just this sort of pissing match.
So
I'm skeptical.
Yeah, certainly skeptical, but I think that's an interesting thing I wanted to talk about, just the way the media covers it, where it's almost being framed as this is like a digital Occupy, and this is another, like TC said, is this going to be something that's talisman for what's to come? And I tend to agree with what you're saying, but I do wonder if there is a number of these events that could occur, and if they start happening at a large scale like this, and they happen in continued succession, I'm asking, is there any number of these events that could result in it being some sort of a shift in the way, Main Street and Wall Street think of one another? Because while TC and I have a hard time understanding not only the concept of short selling and short squeezes and how that's even legal, I'm also aware that those are fairly basic. That's not an uncommon thing that happens. Like that's like the basis of a lot of these institutions. But I also think that like 90% of the country doesn't understand it at all. So it's like something that's very, very basic for, like, as you said, institutional traders. It's not an arcane, obscure thing. It's literally how the entire market works. And then the second something like this happens, there are 10,000, how to explain this to dummies. And I'm like, well, the dummies are all of us whose money you have.
Right. Well, the thing is that, the people who go short, they really only are playing with really rich people's money for the most part. You could, as a person, go short, I guess. Like, if you wanted to open like a Vanguard account, and if you got a special kind of permission from them, they'll let you do some short trading. Okay. But it doesn't make sense to go to short trade if you don't have a ton of money. Not just because it's super risky, which it is, but because the fees that you have to pay to get into a short position are so high that you really need to have a lot of money in order to make the kind of return that would be necessary to like make those fees make sense. And these hedge funds, they usually have a minimum investment requirement of 6 to 7 figures for a particular person. So it is really just kind of rich people's money that does this stuff. But that's what the whole system is anyways. Like almost all the money in the system is rich people's money. So, it doesn't matter in that sense. But yeah, I would say, when you think about short selling in particular, it's not only that it's novel, or it's not only that it's totally basic and happens all the time, but it's not even clear that it's problematic in any meaningful way. It can be used in a problematic way because someone could take a short position and then do external things to try to tank a company just so they can make money. Because
kind of like the opposite of hiring Drew Brees.
Right.
Yeah, but you can do that with on the other side of it as well, because you could buy a stock and then really promote it, and pump and dump, as they say. And so those are kind of two sides of the same coin. And on the flip side, you can also short a stock and do something good with your short position. And so this is something that Ackman was actually doing, even though he wasn't like well intended. He was just trying to make money. But he was saying, hey, I have noticed that Herbalife is probably illegal because it's a pyramid scheme. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get myself in a position where I make a lot of money if the government comes in and blows it up as a pyramid scheme. And it would be really good if the government did that. And then he goes and tries to get the government to do that. And like, that's not like the way I would create a society, but in the society that exists, creating a situation where someone can make a lot of money by helping the government crack down on a bad company is not so bad either.
Do you have a Robinhood account?
I do not. I read the New York Times article 8 months ago about Robinhood, and it was pretty clear that they tell you, of course, it's free. You can make free trades, and that's why everyone's involved. But like, obviously nothing's free. And so the question is, how do they make money? And the answer seems to be that they front run trades that you do. So they know, our users are going to, right now are ordering a bunch of GameStop shares or whatever it might be. And so they get out ahead of that and make some money by having that knowledge and like getting their orders in first, if that makes sense. And so that means you're really paying an elevated price because they're front running your orders. And so that's how they make their money. So it's not really free at all. It's just opaque the way that they're charging you fees essentially. So I don't see any point in transacting that way, but also in general, there's no point in buying options and stuff for a regular person. Like, I get it, if you're bored in pandemic, you have a lot of money, but it's a losing proposition for the most part.
And there was no sports.
Well, I remember the article was like
no gambling.
The article said this is bad. It's like sports gambling, and I was looking around nervously, laughing, being like, "Yeah, who would do that?" Wow.
Yeah, no, options are really exactly like sports betting, right? In the sense that you have a bookie in the middle, which is the bank, and they're taking options. They're selling options to both sides of everything, and hoping that they all kind of cancel out at the end of the day, and they make their money on the fees.
So do you have your hot stocks right now?
No, I'm only invested in the like total market index funds. I don't have any stock picking.
But somewhat to drill down on the question I had before that was probably too long is just, does it seem to you like, and certainly, I mean, electing Joe Biden is not indicative of this, but that, like, I don't know, it was cliche today to say, like, look, it's AOC and Dave Portnoy agreeing on something, or here's Ted Cruz amplifying this or that message. Does it seem to you that there's any chance that these sort of occurrences could tap into a general populist frustration that plays on class struggle? And that, like, is there anything to hope for here whenever I see these type of stories, to think if this does keep happening, that people will start to see Wall Street as against them, and that there's I don't know what it would mean politically, but that there's something to this having momentum on that front?
You never know, I guess. You're right that AOC got interested in it, and Ted Cruz, and so certainly some politicians see some narrative value in this kind of populist David versus Goliath type of story. That's at least, been how it's described. But I don't know, just like, aside from people getting swept up in the narrative of it and then that having some effect, just the mechanics of what's going on just doesn't seem that interesting or new, really. So it's just hard for me to get my head around why would this cause anything to change exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to, as I'm talking along, I think you're right. But, to present the best devil's advocate case, it certainly has made ripples in the attention economy. Like, you finally got people focused on this little thing, and maybe we could make some hay while that happens that could be lasting. I'm sure that there are things about the stock market that are bad. I don't know. I don't spend my time thinking about it most of the time. But,
Well, the stock market as an institution is the vehicle that, that capitalists, that's how they get paid. That's how they get their pound of flesh, right? So, but what people do inside of that battle, what like little capitalists do fighting with one another over the surplus is, I don't know. It's basically a little zero-sum fight among rich people over, who's gonna get that pound of flesh that they've extracted from the economy. So, it's, I don't know. At that point, it's like the badness has already occurred. So if you guys want to tear each other up fighting over this money, then go at it, I guess.
Yeah. What we really want to see is higher wages for GameStop cashiers.
It is a bit, I was just going to say, it is a bit funny that this is happening to the same company that I remember 1 month ago was in the headlines for. I don't recall what the mechanism for this was, but somehow maybe it was a drawing, or at some company Christmas parties, you could win an iPad or something. The thing that they were giving away to the lucky employee was the opportunity to work more even wage overtime during Black Friday.
That's what you would get if you pinned the tail on a donkey.
Exactly, basically, yeah. If you win at the fair game, then you could win. You could win more minimum wage hours to deal with the worst possible version of the consumer that you would deal with all year, and that is a bit ironic.
Well, that's one of the weird things about some of the coverages and some of the Redditors is no one seems to understand that if the stock price of GameStop goes way up, that doesn't really affect the company in any direct way, because the company is not selling these shares. The money doesn't go to the company. It's just traders who are selling the shares back and forth. The only way it could really have an impact is in a lot of companies, the executives are paid with stock. So if the stock price goes way up, then their compensation goes way up. And so driving up the price of most companies' stock, the only effect's going to be big bonuses for executives. It doesn't trickle down at all. It has no effect on the company's ability to raise money or its performance or anything. So
I did have a friend who's much smarter than me tell me that AMC is going to be able to make it through the pandemic just because of this, that they did some move to help with their debt somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, so conceivably a company could start they could start issuing new stock and saying, hey, people love our stock, so we're going to start selling a bunch and then bring cash into the company. But that takes a little while to do, so you can't just like snap your fingers and do it. You have to do like some SEC paperwork and do a filing and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of hard to, take advantage of it. But conceivably someone could do that. Most companies don't issue shares after their IPO, really. That's the only time they really do it. So it's not a way that most companies bring cash into their firms.
I've seen this described by a couple people. I think it was the Jacob Silverman article in the New Republic is one I'm referencing here, and he kind of wrote about the entire casino narrative, and that's a big part of the reason why Ocean's 11 got made is because nobody's mad at seeing a casino get robbed and et cetera. So he had a line in here about, I'll just read it. The financialization of the U.S. economy over the last 40 years has been a disaster for most Americans, bringing about income inequality, recessions, a housing crisis. The impression probably justified the economy simply doesn't work for them. So when I think we would probably all agree that that's true. So when you speak about how financialization is really the most direct and sensible way to give more control to workers over large and medium-sized companies, does it seem more likely to you that your plan would be doable, or to some sort of large-scale overhaul that basically rewrites the entire way that the stock market works? Which one of those two things do you think is more likely to be doable?
So I think the reforms that are focused on sort of counteracting financialization, those are probably more likely to pass than my approach, which is like, this is great. The capitalists have just given us the rope we need to hang them. Let's just snatch it. Obviously, that is a little bit clever, though like I said, Sweden did try it. So, but yeah, in the U.S. context, probably you're more likely to see and you're already seeing some success around these like anti-monopoly type movements that are focused more on like, let's break things up and let's get them out of the stock market and let's have more, owner-operated businesses and small and medium-sized firms. I don't think in the long run that's like the optimal strategy, even if you could make the case that it's better than what we have now. But it trades off with the optimal strategy. And so that's sort of the question you always have to deal with when you're kind of dealing with like second best and third best alternatives, which is, do you want to go into one of those second best alternatives, even if that makes it impossible to do the perfect thing that you want to get done? Or is it best to kind of hold out and like maybe one day you could turn the switch and really get that optimal thing you want done? So I don't know. I mean, but in the near term, for sure, the antitrust stuff and the anti-monopoly stuff is got way more legs than the social wealth fund, for example, where the government starts buying up all these companies through this process.
Do you have any sense why? Like we talk about Sweden's Meitner plan in a very glowing way. But like, it's been a long time since they started trying it and then, lost power and had it stop trying. How come they haven't tried again? I mean, I assume that there's probably been people in Swedish political history that have gone around saying we should do it again. How come they never? I mean, they've had a while to get it started again. They haven't done so.
Yeah, so there are left-wing parties in these countries that will still say, let's do this again. I had a member of parliament from Denmark reach out to me recently because they were like, we're trying to, but they're like a left-wing party that has, I don't know, 8% maybe. So, the politics the left is not as ascendant as it used to be. The other thing is the Meitner plan was like a specific way of bringing these companies' stock into public ownership. But there are more there are more straightforward ways to do it than the way he was proposing it. And you have seen a lot of countries go that route. So we have sovereign wealth funds. There's like 80 sovereign wealth funds now throughout the world. And that's basically the Meitner plan, just through a different mechanism. So for example, in Norway, currently the government owns 35% of all the domestic corporate equity. So they own essentially 35% of all the companies in the country, weighted by their size. And that wasn't done through a kind of Meitner plan type way where you use stock dilution and all these kinds of complicated mechanisms. They just were like, we've got a bunch of cash, we're just going to buy a bunch of companies, And a lot of governments have done that over the years, including, like I mentioned in my paper about this, Alaska, where the government there owns something like $60 billion worth of stock. I guess the long story short is it has been happening kind of low key, but people don't really think about it as socialization anymore because it's often being done by people who aren't talking about it in socialist terms. They're just doing it because it's a decent way to store money and to store surplus and to improve the fiscal position of a government.
I remember the first time I learned about the Alaska Permanent Fund as like a high schooler and really had no sense for money. So I was like, thousands of dollars a year? I won't have to work at all? Just enjoy all the salmon I want?
And are they the state or is it another that owns a significant portion of GameStop right now?
Yeah, no, they owned... They own. I forget how much it was, but I think they owned about $1 million worth, but now it would be worth about $39 million. That was based on the last time they reported. They've made about $38 million. And, Alaska only has I don't remember exactly, but it's got very few people, so it's a pretty decent chunk of money for a state of that size.
I did not know that angle. That is wonderful news.
Yeah. They got
Norway also owned until very recently they owned 2.75% of GameStop, which is a pretty large chunk.
Yeah.
But I was reading in the financial press today, the financial press there asked the fund, like, hey, what's up? Do you guys still own GameStop? And they said that they sold all their GameStop at the end of last year, so they missed all of this.
That's too bad.
Still made a ton, I would imagine, given where it was at the start of
PS5 sales were good.
Yeah. So something that I've seen you writing about, obviously, and that is interesting to me, sort of compared with, obviously, one of these things is covered a lot more in the media. But if you look at, the entire, populist anger over the way that this is unfolding, and then Robinhood gets banned this morning, and people have their torches out, or Robinhood bans those stock and option buys. But then if you look at the pushback against some of your ideas, like with the universal child benefit, it's a bit odd to me that people are very quick to be really upset about one thing that might not really affect them that much, but cannot draw up the ire to push back on this Biden child tax credit plan. And it's just always been a little bit weird to me that people seem in this country, and I mean, I grew up in a family that had absolutely no chance of being millionaires or anything approaching it, but they certainly supported a lot of policies that helped people who were. So why do we have just such a general hatred in this country for just writing someone a check when they need it, when the money is basically there?
Yeah, so I mean, the historical answer for this is just that, it's starting with the New Deal, right? FDR did institute a lot of policies that were just writing people checks, right? So he created Social Security, in which we just write elderly and disabled people checks. and he created unemployment insurance, in which we do the same thing for unemployed people. He also created aid to families with dependent children, which at the time was meant for basically single mothers, which was widows and, I don't know, some sort of a handful of unfortunate people who found themselves in that situation. Single motherhood wasn't very common at the time, and people were much more sympathetic to someone who was in that position at that moment. And so that was the thing, and it was good. And what's interesting is, like, some of the programs where we do just cut people checks, over time they were so popular, they've kind of receded from our thinking about the welfare state. Like, people don't think all that much about Social Security as a welfare program where we just send out checks to old people and disabled people. Instead, it's kind of morphed into something that, like, well, I worked for it and I paid for it, and that's really just kind of like ideology working in reverse, right? Like, people like this program, they love getting those checks when they're old or when they're disabled or when they're unemployed. And so they kind of work backwards and say, well, it's not like it's not really a handout. I worked for it, and I paid tax. And so I don't know. That's one thing that definitely happens is these popular programs where we do cut checks, they get melded into a more kind of conservative presentation where we don't think of them as just like handouts, even though that's what they are. The other thing that happened, though, is, and this is with children in particular, is aid to families with dependent children became very unpopular starting in the 70s and 80s due to these ideas about, welfare mothers driving Cadillacs and living lives of luxury and all that kind of stuff. Reagan was big about pushing that. And all that stuff was bogus. I mean, like, I'm sure you could find a handful of people who were doing that kind of stuff, but, like, by and large, people.
Yeah, there was one lady who was like the top finesse lord of all time. I think that's the one he'd usually refer to specifically, and, respect to her.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why one of my favorite hip hop moments of all time, ultimately, I think, was very, very destructive for policy, which was when ODB had a video play, I believe, at the VMAs where he picked up his welfare check in a limousine, which is very funny but not helpful.
Sends the wrong
that's on the first of the month,
right?
Yeah. It's a great one. But aid to families with dependent children, it had some problems because if you wanted to work, you would lose your benefits. So people, they were kind of caught in a trap, and there was a lot of racialized aspects to it. People were saying, oh, well, a bunch of black mothers are living off of this. There are a bunch of black single mothers and blah, 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 right? So I don't know. There was a reaction against cash benefits for poor single mothers with children in the 1990s. That's why we got the welfare reform in 1996. They essentially eliminated aid to families with dependent children. There is a new program called Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, but it basically doesn't exist. And from that point on, if you track it, the consensus among policy people and among political people has been that you cannot give cash benefits to sort of the poorest of the poor, like parents. You can't give cash benefits to non-working single mothers, especially, which is where the poorest of the poor are among parents. You can't do that. It's political suicide. It's impossible. It's also bad because we need to encourage them to work and whatever. So if you're in that position these days, you can get food stamps and you can get Medicaid, but you can't get money. And sometimes you can get Section 8 housing, but you can't get money. And that's just sort of where we've been for a long time. And so instead, they created these tax credit programs, the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, which are basically the same thing, even though they have different names. And to get these tax credits, you have to earn a certain amount of money. So, like, to get the full EITC, you need to earn something like $10,000. To get the full CTC, it's more than that, depending on the number of kids you have. And so that's sort of where we've been. We exclude the poorest of the poor from cash. We say, hey, if you want some assistance, you need to work a little. And then, that's the situation we've been in for a long time. And then the other thing that tax credits do is they hide the benefit. And that was another thought people had, that, well, welfare benefits, people don't like to receive them, and so it's good to kind of bury them in the tax code, call them tax credits, and then, middle class people who don't want to feel like they're on welfare, they're fine claiming a child tax credit, but they're not okay going and signing up for a dole check or whatever. So that was part of that as well. So that's where we wound up.
You contrast that with what we saw this week and what we're still seeing. It's a lot of people who have a decent piece of money. Over half the country has stock, and when they get upset about something, it seems as if perhaps people listen a little bit more than if it's someone who can't get to $10,000 to get
Twitter
the
accounts.
proper. Yeah, exactly. Much more.
No, absolutely. I think
amplification.
Because this is something I've been focused on this for literally one of the first things I got into when I got interested in policy, which would have been around 2011 or 2012, was this thing, and then looking at the fact that we have these cash benefits we do send out to kids. We do it through these tax credits. But if you're really poor, you don't get anything. And it's that's crazy. Normally the argument that the left has with sort of centrists is the left says we want to give it to everyone, and the center is well, we don't want to give it to rich people and blah 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 blah. And you look at this, it's that's not even the main problem here. The main problem here is you're not even giving it to the poor. You guys are cutting out the poor in this process. And that seems strange and weird. And why would you do that? Those people need it more than anyone.
Yeah. If you had to pick one group to give it to, I think that they would be your top group.
Yeah. If you were hey, we have a bunch of cash benefits, you can give it to people who earned less than $10,000 or people who earn more than $10,000. I'd say, well, less than $10,000. How could you live on that? I'd for sure give it to them. But they've made the opposite decision, and it is strange. The idea, I don't know. No one really cares about the particulars of what goes on at that level of the income ladder. It seems like there's not a whole lot of policy interest in it. There's not a whole lot. Obviously, I don't know. Who's going to donate money for that kind of thing? Not the poor. They don't have any money to donate. So the policy institutions that work on this stuff in DC just seem really detached. They're basically getting a bunch of money from high net worth individuals, companies, and foundations, and they sort of do what they can. Basically, that seems to be the sentiment, instead of being really hard line about no, this needs to be good, it needs to be perfect, these people are really important, and these people especially need the most help in getting these benefits, and so it matters, what you do here, and really, really matters, because they're going to struggle the most to jump through hoops and things like that to get this stuff, so we got to make it easy for them.
So another benefits question, the child tax credit that Biden's been rolling out, I think it's it was based on the American Families Act, right? Is that what it was called?
Yeah. It was called the American Family Act, and then there was another bill called the Working Families Tax Relief Act, which encompassed the American Family Act, but that's what it was nodding towards.
But see, you did a couple podcasts, and I believe put out a paper indicating that there were probably better ways to do it than what they were proposing. And then I heard your brief rundown on the most recent podcast about that they've since moved closer to your proposal, and I don't know. I just wanted to hear as many details about that as possible. Did you talk to Jeff Stein at any point? I think it was Jeff Stein that was asking the questions about it, right?
Yeah. Well, for sure. I was talking to Jeff Stein the whole time.
Okay.
I know, Jeff reports on this stuff professionally, and, I'm a big voice in this area, and I'm also someone that'll shoot you straight. I think that helps me a little bit with the press. I do have a decent amount of success getting press people to cover my stuff and listen to me and quote me in articles, more than you would expect. And I think part of that is just, if you talk to most people at most of these organizations in DC, they've got their talking points, and they're going to keep things off the record, and I'll shoot you very straight. You could bring something to me, and I'll tell you exactly if it makes sense and walk you through it. But yeah, so he read all those posts that I wrote, and he was basically saying, I'm going to write a piece about this, and I'm going to go ask people on the Hill to respond to these criticisms. And when he went and asked them about these criticisms, things started to change. I think primarily because they would rather fix some of these problems than have a piece in the Washington Post that's outlining how their bill sucks so bad and has all these problems that they don't have an answer for, So I think that was the thing that nudged it to start moving in these directions, which was cool. Had a bit of an impact as a thinkfluencer,
Yeah, I mean,
that's bigger than Eve 6, really.
Yeah, I think I would probably call that the top accomplishment. Yeah.
Yeah, so far, I mean, like I said, I think on the podcast, like prior to, the last month or so, the whole game had been getting stuff on Bernie's platform, which I'd gotten about 3 or 4 stuff on Bernie's platform, which, I don't know, in the think tank world is an accomplishment, that he was second in the presidential primary, and like that's a big deal.
He did win the war of ideas, I'm told.
Okay. But this one like could actually have an impact on something that gets passed and could make it a lot more accessible to people. And so this was the first time I really tried to kind of do a thing where it's like, I'm going to take what Democrats are doing and I'm going to argue why it could be done so much better. And not just like, well, you want 15 an hour, I do 17 an hour. But like, no, just the design, make the design better and see if they could be made to be responsive to that. And so far, it seems like one for one that they were responsive to those criticisms, at least once a journalist started hounding them about it.
It's incredibly awesome. But on the other hand, like, you wonder how many laws that are currently on the books could have been so much better if they would have just written one critical article.
No, 100%. I mean, it is shocking to me. I know the people who wrote the initial bill, and I had been talking to the people who were engaged in that process for 2 or 3 years. I mean, if you search American Family Act on my website, peoplespolicyproject.org, you can see I've been writing about it for a while. And it just, nothing came of it. And I'm just looking at this and I'm just like, this is going to be a disaster. I mean, you read this bill and they're saying that people with relatively modest incomes who maybe their income went from $30,000 to $40,000 and they forgot to change their benefit sort of election, that they were going to basically be paying $1,000, $2,000 at the end of the year in a surprise tax bill. Like, that's going to be a disaster, clearly. And you would point this out to people, decision makers, and talk to some of the other think tankers, and it just, I don't know, whatever, shrug. A lot of people signed on to it. We can't change it now, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, these people make a lot of money. I mean, you can look at this. You can look up the salaries of people at other think tanks if they're high enough, because they report them because they're nonprofits and they have to do that to the IRS. And I do that. And I know the guy who was the main guy spearheading this, and he makes $240,000 a year. And he has a whole team. And that's double what my whole think tank's budget is. And like, you should get that right. If you're making $240 a year, I shouldn't need to come in and clean that up for you, And I
know this is a bit uncomfortable to ask somebody to sort of talk about themselves like this. So rather than frame it in, our esteemed guest here is just so much smarter than that guy. I often wonder why it is that people that are in that position do have such shitty ideas. And I guess I wonder if it really just is career preservation, and it really just is an angle to continue to move up in that world by presenting the either safest or most common accepted ideas rather than putting forth, I guess I could give them the benefit of the doubt and say they do actually believe in it. I don't know, but it certainly hasn't had the level of critical thought that is required. Do you think that the reason that we do end up with a lot of stale, shitty ideas is because it is profitable for the people who present them to present them?
Yeah,
basically, I'm saying because you have no career aspirations, you're allowed to have good ideas.
No, that's definitely part of it, because I mean, think about it. There are two things that operate here, right? So one is a kind of classic manufacturing consent type dynamic, where if you're the kind of person who has ideas that are basically where everyone else is, well, that's good, because everyone else controls whether you get hired and fired and promoted, right? So and this happens at news organizations as well, right? So if you're a kind of you come into a news organization and you have really outlandish views that are not consistent with where everyone else is, you're not going to succeed in the newspaper. But if you happen to have views that are very consistent with everyone else, you're going to succeed. And that doesn't therefore make you require someone, that doesn't even, pointing that out doesn't even require saying that someone like sells out in the sense that like they change their views to get along. It's just that people who have alternative views get weeded out. And so the survivors are often just true believers, but the only reason they survived is because they had the views that they had, not because their views are good, but because they're consistent with, you know, where everyone else was. So that is a strong force for like homogeneity. The other aspect of this is the criticism, right? Because within this community, most of the people who are engaged in think tanking, they want to be hired on the Hill or they want to be hired in a White House administration. That's their final goals. And I cannot understand that at all because those jobs suck. But some people, they love that stuff. And it just doesn't make sense.
You get to meet Congress people.
You get to sit up there and have them, get some calls, talk to people from other organizations who come in and want to, talk your ear off about this or that, regarding Israel or something. And it's like, I don't know. I answered phones for a summer in Dennis Kucinich's office, and so I kind of got to see what it was like, and it really was not appealing. I love him though. But anyways, it doesn't make sense to rock the boat because these are your peers. And if you piss them off by pointing out that their stuff sucks, then that's not good for your career. What if one of them winds up as the second undersecretary under HHS and has the ability to hire an assistant? Well, now you're not going to get that job. I think that's part of it as well. Just keeping solid within your professional network. But I don't have to do that because I'm not aiming for any of these jobs, and I'm not aiming for the same kind of money. I'm not aiming to be promoted within the policy world, aiming to get any of these jobs within the White House or the Hill. So I just fire away.
One quick ticket reference, and I don't know that this is before you were maybe not listening as much as you were back in like high school, but something you guys touched on there has always been what I think is one of the most underrated things about one of the best things that ever happened on the ticket, which was when Norm was talking to Pat Summerall and confused that Pat was in a
classic.
Was in Washington when Pat was in Jacksonville for a game, and Norm is setting up, and he's like, sometimes you're in this city or that city, Pat, and there's nothing going on. But this weekend, Pat, you were in Washington. I mean, the place where people are there to see and be seen, you were in Washington. And Pat says, well, we were in Jacksonville. And that's the comedy to most people. The comedy to me is I just never remember seeing like a pan shot of FedEx Field with Denny Hastert.
Landover, Maryland's not...
like it was like Staples Center and... Here's Kanye.
They don't have the stadium in Hollywood.
Yeah, boy, the place to see and be seen.
I mean, when the Redskins are playing well.
Just thought that was such an odd way to describe being in D.C. Like, oh, as you said, there's an undersecretary. Huge Skins fan. So weird.
Right. Well, but also everyone in D.C. is, they're not from D.C., so they don't, at this level, so they don't support the local team anyways, except for baseball, I guess. That's the sort of exception, but,
And if you're working in an office, Massachusetts office or something, you're supposed to be a Patriots fan. It's going to reflect poorly on you.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
It's my interpretation from your tweets and podcasts that you do sometimes partake in the Ticket Sports Day app. I was wondering if you had any feedback for Jake.
Come on,
yeah,
don't do
I
this.
listen to it a lot now. Actually, I like the Ticket Top 10. That's an easy digestible thing. I don't know. I don't really have, I don't have any feedback, I guess. I like
segments
the
that are working,
spends.
segments that aren't.
Please stop. Don't do this.
The Kemp spends are good for sure. What was the, God, I don't even know. I mean, I've grown to appreciate Dan a lot more than I did when I was a kid because he seems a lot more. I don't know. I feel much in my older age. I can understand, I guess, more of his seeming kind of misanthropic sort of grumpiness. If that's an accurate description, I don't know. That's how it comes across on the radio. So I like the setup with you guys.
I appreciate that, and it is certainly how it comes across on the radio. And I think what's great about Dan, and I think I struggle to pull this off sometimes, and I think most people do, is he's really good at doing radio. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that's how he is. He's very, very good at doing, I wouldn't even say a character, but doing a show. And then he's a really pretty sweet guy in normal life. I would say the thing that I struggle with the most, and it does sometimes trip me out that I know that people like you listen, is, I mean, at the end of the day, like, it's a commercial radio station, you know? It is just an odd spot to be in when you know that you have things that you would like to say or expound on. And I mean, the pure fact is, I am basically the person who wants to become undersecretary at Health and Human Services in this job, because I don't want to piss off the person who, I mean, I am the person you just described, because this is kind of my only thing. And I do think sometimes I feel kind of shitty about it. Like, when, not about the show, but just about like not really issuing this opinion or that opinion. And a lot of times that's in direct response to directives to not. It's not just my intuition to not. It is actually, you know, and you've seen this reported in the news that certain companies have told people like, hey, please do not discuss these topics. And I don't think that's that much of an imposition on a sports station, but sometimes it does feel a little bit weird that I kind of am like, I don't know if I can really do that, because, you know, right now at least, got to feed this kid. And that, you know, I don't love the way that feels all the time.
Everyone has to play the game for the most part if they're conventionally employed. I have the luxury of not having to do that at all, because I just get money from Patreon. So
some of us have a different lifestyle.
Yeah, I'm actually talking to two people right now who
you're the minority in this conversation.
Have pulled this off quite nicely.
When I worked at the National Labor Relations Board, you know, I couldn't, you know, I was just a rank and file, would do whatever the management, you know, wanted me to do. You know, if I disagreed with some decision that was made about, you know, regulating this or that company and penalizing this or that union, I would express it because I was a lawyer and that was my job. But if they were like, we're going this other way, then okay, well, we go this other way, you know. So I know how that goes. That's the nature of our system, and employment is a coercive kind of relationship that requires people to stay in line to some degree. So, you know, I wouldn't worry too much about it, but I've liberated myself from that, so I'm free to fire.
Did you ever run into Hayes and Boone, the firm, in your NLRB work?
No, I never hit them.
Okay, that's a question just for me. I had a friend who used to work there. I had something that I came across on the internet within the last couple days, and just wanted to ask if you'd seen this. I think that you probably have, and we're all very familiar with the phenomenon. But somehow I had missed to this point the Rogue Melania Twitter account. You guys ever seen the Rogue Melania Twitter account?
No,
I have not.
I mean, you know the whole genre of Rogue White House, great stuff, top to bottom.
Rogue Cabinet.
But this one's at Rogue First Lady, and they pretty much just tweet like basic resistance opinions. But the twist here is that they make fun of the fact her English isn't her first language.
Okay, yeah.
So it's kind of a next level. During the inauguration, when Kamala Harris got sworn in, it said, "You is witnessing history right now."
Okay, yeah, that seems like a massive waste of time.
That's good for.
What was the engagement on that?
That's what that one was. I believe 727 likes, and for the account, 85,000 people look at this and say, you know, tell me more.
I just can't do it. I've retired from all of those type of accounts.
Yeah, I think we're past that. I don't know. I feel like the resistance stuff has kind of dialed back a bit. I think we might enter into a new period. I don't know where the libs are going to go with it. But I don't know. And with Trump being completely muted, it's like they don't even have that to tee off on, you know.
Something I was telling TC yesterday, and I don't know, maybe the GameStop Wall Street bets thing would have popped either way, but we often talk about how we miss reading really interesting people writing really interesting things that had absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump. And I know, like, your space with policy, like, you're pretty nose to the grindstone on stuff that matters, you know, to the administration and to shaping these things. But for like a 4 or 5 year period, all the cool places I used to read fun stuff, they wrote about nothing but Donald Trump. And it's like, all right, we might be in a attention economy, to quote TC here. We're like, all right, we're going to get to read about some of the cool stuff again. I'd love another Dread Pirate Roberts 70-page Silk Road article. Absolutely. And those just aren't, they were not getting written during the Trump era. So I'm hoping we're back to that.
It seems like Trump was so easy to get your clicks and get your headlines and stuff. People maybe got a little fat and happy and lazy with it, but once it becomes harder again, they'll have to start scratching around for interesting, weird stuff.
He's like the Game of Thrones of politicians. Like, everybody was just, for like 5 years, like, every writer had to have a Game of Thrones recap on like every website.
I haven't had a chance to get to that one yet.
No, I know, but you know what I'm talking about. They like completely just took over the entertainment.
Is that the HBO show?
Okay, I have one more for Matt. I think about this a lot with people whose opinions that I respect and generally agree with, but not just respect and generally agree with, but respect their process. Is there anything that you would say 5 to 10 years ago that you would have said, I'm definitely right about this 100%, and today you either think completely different about, or you've come off of it at least enough to where you think, maybe I wasn't, Because I do a podcast with a guy who I'm pretty sure has been right about everything for a long time, and I think you two are kind of similar. And then what usually happens is 5 to 10 years later, I'm like, fuck, he was right about that back whenever I thought he was wrong. So I wonder.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question. I mean, in the policy stuff, the thing is that. I don't know. I didn't get going in policy until like writing about policy until I was like 22 or 23, and I spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth on different things to get to that point. So, but that to me, I feel like is sort of my 0 point, and so then I think about what changed over that period. And I don't know. I can't really think of too much, because what I kind of came out of the gate there was, let's just copy Northern Europe. And even though that wasn't a fully understood thing at the moment, like I definitely didn't know nearly as much as I do now about it. That was like my impression. I was like, I know enough about them that I feel like we could just copy that, and maybe do some extra stuff, but like we could copy that. And I still feel that way. I still look at them and go, that works really well. We probably just copy that stuff. The only thing one thing that I can think of, and I don't know, I kind of go back and forth on how I feel about it these days, is when I'm thinking about student benefits in particular. Because when I was in college, there was a big movement around, student debt and that kind of stuff. And of course, you're just surrounded by other kids. And I was big into like leftist politics and leftist organizations and on campus, and they were all real into that. And I kind of found it a little bit strange. I mean, I don't know. This is maybe a little bit cheap, but I did not come from, I was a first generation student and stuff. I don't know, like the notion of students as I was an oppressed class really kind of struck me as weird. Like it was very much like, no, you're like on top. You're going to college. You're the top of the heap. And so, but over time, I've maybe softened a little bit on that stuff, and understood a little bit more the idea that maybe we do need to think about students as an object of welfare concern, as I sometimes phrase it, in the same way that we think about unemployed people or things like that. But I don't know what the practical upshot of that is. It's just I've changed that opinion a little bit and begin to think, okay, yeah. Those are welfare state people. We do probably need to take care of them in one form or another, even though they are relatively privileged across society. But so that's a kind of pretty small thing. And even that, if you go to the Nordic countries, they do that there as well. So that's like coming home really to say, yep, no, Finland got that one right too. You know.
For me, I no longer think that the invasion of Iraq was our finest hour and proudest moral moment. I had a shirt that said that in 2003, and I've taken it off now.
See, I keep my opinions very focused. So,
yeah.
You know, then I don't get sidetracked. You know, like I think about some of the people who got going on, I don't know, like abolish the police or whatever. And like, you know, I'm on board for sure, radical criminal justice reform and all that kind of stuff. But I was like, I don't know, I'll set this one out because I don't really know what that means exactly. And I don't know, like other countries have police and I don't know, that it just seemed like a little strange. But a lot of people, like, they need to have an opinion on everything all the time. And, you know, that's a good way to get yourself contradicting yourself over time, which is also not bad. I don't know. But in the takes game, it's a point of pride to not contradict yourself, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we super appreciate the time. This was cool.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Good luck. Good luck with everything. You know, keep on keeping on. Stay hard, etc.
Thanks, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
That's it for tonight. The high school special is next, so until tomorrow. For everyone who's been a part of this one, I'm
TC and Jake.
We do thank you for watching. Good night.